So welcome back to another episode of Dubious Intellectual Yabbering.
The DIY show.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys want to yabber about this week?
I don't know. What do you want to yabber about?
Uh, so I have like a topic I want to yabber about.
All right,
So I've
let's do it.
been about it a little bit recently. So the topic I would like to talk about is well, your name's Yodel today. Interesting. So like, what makes a good conversation? Thoughts?
Mm,
And like related questions like what's the purpose of conversation? Um, yeah, and like I don't know. Do you guys have thoughts?
uh, I think that
You
those
guys like
are
conversations?
very interesting questions. I think that the purpose of conversation is probably to understand things, um, and also, I don't know, it's like for understanding a form of self-expression or to be understood, and then also entertainment. But because understanding is like the loftier goal of conversations, sometimes in order to get there, you have to make small talk as well. So I guess I'd add like social lubricant to that.
By understanding, do you mean like understanding information or understanding things about the other person specifically?
Both.
Oh, mm,
And I think what makes a good conversation is it's kind of twofold because I think to have a good conversation, you have to have interesting things to say, but you also have to present them in a way that the other person can engage with them. And at the same time, you have to be interested in listening to what the other person says.
interesting.
Yeah.
What about you, Ian?
I think conversation, similarly to Yodel, I think conversation is a means of conveying information. And by information, I mean information with the capital I. So, like thoughts, ideas, feelings, emotions, anything, right? Um, and in terms of what makes a good conversation, that's a more complex question that I think a variety of people would have different answers to. And even a large amount of people would have different answers to it depending on the day, right? Um, so that's tough to say, but depending, I guess a good conversation is one in which you accomplish a conversational goal. Because there are times where
Mm,
you don't want to have a very long conversation. So in that circumstance, a good conversation might be you engage in small talk and then move on with your life, right? But in other cases, you may achieve a conversational bonus goal that you were surprised to even happen upon by learning a new piece of history, for instance, in my case, or um, uh, learning about a different way of looking at an idea that you thought of, right? Or a new board game strategy, like something like that. So you could learn something, you could gain some insight into another person. And then there are also conversational goals where sometimes your goal in a conversation is just to railroad the other person in and get your idea across. So,
Sometimes your
yeah.
conversational goal could be to end the conversation as quickly as possible.
No, that's what I mean. But that was my first example. But I decided to explain that in a as the goal being to end the conversation as quickly as possible in a tactful manner.
Then is that a good conversation or is that a good encounter?
It's a conversation. If words are exchanged, I think it's a conversation.
So are you saying that your ideal conversation depends on the situation? You don't have
So
like
I
a
think that generally speaking, everyone's ideal conversation is a conversation in which they fulfill some conversational goal, and I think that's true of me as well. And it depends on what my conversational goals are going into the conversation, and there are also conversational goals that I may not know I had that I could achieve.
mm, so you would say you don't have a hierarchy of conversation.
Hierarchy.
I don't know what you mean. I think there are different types of conversation in which you have different goals, right?
Mm,
I
I
don't know
would
if I
say,
would use the
yeah,
antiquated word hierarchy.
I think I have a hierarchy of conversations. I think that there are definitely types of conversations that I would prefer to have over other types.
Okay.
What are your thoughts,
I
Danny?
find it like interesting that like you keep saying the word like conversational goal. So I feel like
It's a
that's
term
like
in
some
sociology.
what?
It's a
Oh, you
term in
went
sociology.
sociology. Yeah, I feel like most of the time I don't have like the consciously like, at least like an explicit goal going to conversation.
Generally, I do not also.
No. Interesting. Yeah.
Hmm. I feel like I have conversational goals.
Okay, what are some like examples? Do you try yeah, like what are some examples of conversation goals?
Sometimes my goal going into a conversation is to make myself understood or to relieve stress, as they say. Other times, my goal in conversations is to make the other person feel comfortable or to make them like me more. Other times, my goals in conversation are to learn things about another person or to make them feel like they've been understood.
Okay,
So I
what
think,
about like most
mhm,
conversations with like a friend, someone like you already know pretty well? Like, do you go into it with any goals, or is it just like, because I view that as like a regular like socializing things
mhm.
where there's like not that much pressure. I feel like it's usually
Yeah,
more like a free flow of just like ideas and stuff.
I feel like any action that you take consciously always has some kind of goal behind it. So even if I'm just, chatting with my friends, I'm doing with I'm doing it with some kind of goal, whether it be to, you know, hear more about their day because that's how I can stay in touch with their lives or to entertain myself, that kind of thing. So I feel like maybe I don't consciously think like this is the goal and this is the conversation that I want to keep to, but in picking conversational topics or like the situation in which I instigate the conversation, there is always some kind of goal behind it.
Interesting. All right, and then I have a follow-up question. I feel like we should start, like um I feel like when you were talking about like the hierarchy thing, or
Mm-hmm.
like some conversations you like prefer a little bit more than other types. I feel like I'm sort of like similar to that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so like what would you describe as like the levels of the hierarchy? Is it related to like how like deep like the conversation is about like their life versus like more shallower topics like the weather and stuff?
Yeah, I think that the depth of the conversation does factor into it. I think my preferred types of conversation would be conversations in which I learn something about how the other person views themselves, or I guess views the world as well. But I think that people's views on the world reflect a lot on sort of who they are as people. So I think that getting to know another person better on that kind of deep level is the most interesting kind of conversation to me. And then after that, I think it is interesting to learn just like things or like facts about the world in general. And then below that is sort of the day to day, like, how was the weather? Did you see the news? That kind of thing conversation.
Mm. What are your thoughts, Ian?
I don't believe in conversational hierarchies.
Yeah, so you, as I feel like, yeah, I feel like it makes sense for you. So you enjoy talking about random stuff as much as talking about like exam in life, basically, or something.
I don't think that's accurate. I think that both types of conversations have their place, and depending on who I'm conversing with, I would enjoy a different type of conversation. Like, I don't really want to have existential life conversations with, I don't know, my coworkers, for example, right? Like, there's a certain level of distance that I'm perfectly happy to maintain with a lot of people.
Why
And
not then?
in that
Like,
in that sense, small mundane conversations are very useful conversations because they create the impression of an amount of like closeness or friendliness without really requiring any give, right?
mhm.
And there's clearly agreed upon rules, which I'm always a fan of. Social rules.
So like, so you're saying that like you tend to like change the conversational topic depending on who you're talking to. Like, do you have like a personal preference towards certain topics more than others, or you it just really just depends
That
on.
that's not also exactly accurate. It's not that I change the conversational topic. It's that certain topics just don't present themselves, right? Um,
Mhm.
and I don't know. I have predispositions for topics. I think some things are very interesting to talk about. I think I've over talked about other things. Um, yeah,
Mm. Okay, I'm just curious. So why don't you like to talk about existential things with your coworkers?
I don't really I don't really want to forge that deep of a connection. I don't know.
Okay, sure.
I When I was much younger, I was perfectly happy talking about existential and philosophical matters with any number of people, but I think I've progressed past that point.
Why do you feel like you've progressed past that point? And also, do you think that it is something people should progress past
I mean,
the
I
point of?
I think it's interesting, but I got to the point where I was just no longer interested in many people's thoughts on existential matters. I asked enough people, and it just kind of came became pretty repetitive. So
Competitive?
yeah, it was less
You can see
interesting to
that.
me. It does make you it does make the instigator of those conversations an interesting person. I can tell you that you get a lot of interesting people points, especially from certain crowds.
Hmm.
Some crowds will be like, "Why are you asking that?" And other crowds will be like, "Who is this mysterious stranger?" So
Which crowds are which?
I don't I don't understand the question. What do you mean?
Which crowds would give you interesting person points for asking those questions and which crowds wouldn't?
I don't want to generalize. I think in my personal experience, writerly type people are often like, oh, mysterious stranger, and I don't really know much to the latter. So you can kind of tell with a person if they don't like talking about existential matters. I have friends like that.
Okay. Okay, on a related note, how do you talk? How do you socialize with people you have nothing in common with?
That is super easy. It's the easiest thing.
So how do you do it?
You just find something you have in common with them.
So you think everyone has something in common with each other, basically.
So you meet someone on a street. You meet a random person on the street. You've never met them before, right? You
Okay.
100% have something in common with. Do you want to make a bet? We can make a bet. I know for a fact you have something in common with them.
Well, it
Any
depends on
random
how
person.
trivial the attribute is. Like,
Well,
yes,
there's one right there. You're both on the same street. Boom, something in common. I mean, yeah. That's why people talk about the weather because it's something you have in common with the other person because you're in the same location.
okay, what if I want to become close friends with someone I have nothing in common with? How do I do that?
I have a list of questions on my phone that are deep existential questions. You should make your own list um, and then ask them.
Mm. So, like, you're saying
And
deep.
it doesn't even matter whether or not you share any commonality. By asking those questions and getting some type of answer, you will become close to the other person because even though you don't share any commonality, you now share the experience of having shared deep existential answers with each other. Because
So,
experience in and of itself is a commonality.
so you feel like deeper topics in general are like more efficient or effective and like getting closer to someone?
If you want to move fast, yeah, absolutely.
Mm, interesting.
What are your thoughts on how to become closer friends with someone, Danny?
Um, See, I feel like if you spend enough time with like enough time with like anyone, like like there's probably like some law where it's like you just gradually get closer and closer with them. Um, but I don't know. I feel like sometimes like having just like certain conversations that are like I guess deeper. It's just like more time efficient and like you'll get
Mm-hmm.
closer to them maybe in like a shorter amount of time. Um, and I feel like sometimes you can like know a person for a long time, but if you never have like these kind of conversations, like there's always just going to be like stuff you don't know about them, right? Yeah, that's how I feel about it. But
So then would you say that understanding is crucial to closeness?
mm, understanding like their will, like their life philosophies and stuff like that.
Mm, yeah, or just understanding in the broad sense.
Mm. I feel
Like,
like,
mhm.
wait, what do you mean in a broader sense?
Are there certain types of things you need to know about a person that are more important in terms of becoming close with them?
Mm. I feel like different people like prefer like different things, right? Like some
Mm-hmm.
people I feel like more so I feel like I'm on like the other end. Like some people are like perfectly satisfied with like never knowing like deeper levels of a person.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like I'm just like more interested in those kinds of conversations personally.
Mm, mm,
Because if you share like a hobby with someone, right, and you
mm,
never have like interesting like, or you never like talk about like life in general and like the bigger picture and stuff, like you can still just enjoy spending time with them, and I
mm,
feel like that's perfectly valid and stuff. Um, yeah. What do you
mm.
think?
That's interesting. I feel like for closeness, um, I think understanding a person's vulnerabilities is very important.
Okay, is that it?
Yeah, yeah. I was thinking about it as you were talking, and I was like, yeah, I feel like even if I don't really talk to someone about their life philosophies, I think that if you are able to tell somebody about your vulnerabilities, then you're probably pretty close with them.
What's up? Okay, so what if I don't have vulnerability? What's like,
Means
I
you
don't know,
haven't dug deep enough.
I feel so like
Maybe you're
vulnerability.
not close enough with yourself, Danny.
I think of vulnerability just as like things you're like insecure about, right? I don't know. Like, what if someone just like a really confident person?
Then I feel like it might be difficult for them to become close with other people because I think that people largely do have vulnerabilities, and it is always easier to empathize with someone's experiences if you have some commonality of experience or perspective.
Wait, so those people, it'll be harder for them to form close relationships?
Possibly. I think it's like those studies that have shown that people who are very wealthy have a hard time empathizing with other people.
Hmm, interesting. Ian, what's your vulnerability?
I have many.
Would you like to share them? Or would you like to share them with me in private?
I don't know if I could think of all of them. I don't know. I don't like the word vulnerability because it seems to imply. I feel like it isn't as all encompassing as just like weakness, right? So
Mm,
I feel like weakness is almost more accurate because I'm a fairly confident person in my own right, in my own self, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't have weaknesses that I can recognize. Sometimes I talk too much. I don't know. I don't have a list anymore, unfortunately. I have
so,
I have a
mhm.
long list of bad habits that I need to get rid of. Big weakness.
Like not writing and stuff?
Yep.
So then do you think that vulnerability is more equivalent to some kind of negative trait or thing about a person?
Maybe the word you're looking for is insecurity?
I feel like they're synonymous, no? Kind of.
So when I say vulnerability, I don't necessarily mean insecurity. I more mean yes, things that you don't like about yourself. But also just like experiences or things that you may think that you struggle with or feel uncomfortable about.
I don't like heights.
Is that a vulnerability?
Yeah, but it's a low level vulnerability.
Mm,
I don't know. I'm afraid of failure. That's a classic one.
mm.
I personally think that that is uh, probably my most prevalent vulnerability because it kind of implicitly informs every single other one of my worries and insecurities. Most of them stem from that.
How would you define vulnerability, Danny?
Um, like I said, vulnerability is not really in my lexicon. Like,
What are
In
you
your
afraid
lexicon?
of, Danny?
what am I afraid of? Um, Probably just like loneliness. Probably like the biggest one. Yeah, loneliness from not being able to form close relationships because of not being able to have good conversations.
I sense a theme. I'm sensing a theme with this discussion.
Your vulnerabilities seem to inform your conversation.
So I guess you're on the right track.
Maybe that's a reason why people who share vulnerabilities are tend to get closer faster, because if you know someone's vulnerabilities, you can more easily understand their motivations in their actions and words.
I
So
agree with that.
instead of thinking this person is doing X, you think this person is doing X because of Y, right? And that helps them feel more human to you.
Okay, so I have like another question, right? So like I'm the type of person who generally prefers like those sorts of topics, like I guess deeper topics and stuff about like them as a person and stuff.
Mhm.
But sometimes I feel like, especially like if they do have like I guess vulnerabilities and stuff, especially if like I haven't known them like long enough, or even I have known them long enough. I don't know. Sometimes I feel like they're not as willing to share it with me. And I feel like it's like a partially at least like a me problem. Because I was talking to like one of my friends the other day, right? And he said he described it as like I can be like a little abrasive in conversations, which I feel like is true because I think I've gotten like hints of that at least like a few times before. So like, what are some advice to like talk about those things and not make people feel bad? I guess, you
I
know.
What do
know
you
people
mean
I
by
feel
who
like it's not really my
abrasive?
intent, but
I
sometimes I'm just like too blunt with things.
I know people who
Uh,
are more abrasive than you are. I can
Mhm.
assure you of that. I don't know if I would ever describe you as abrasive. I would say blunt would be a more accurate negative way to describe that, but I still don't think it's quite right.
Actually, no, I can kind of see it. I think that I have been in some conversations where this may not be your intention, but it seems like you like to poke at things. Is
Yeah.
that okay? That's
You're
what your friend meant.
curious.
It's also like I like to poke. I just like to poke at like someone makes a contradiction. It's just like it's just kind of funny.
Maybe you
But I
spent
also
too
feel
much
like
time
I don't
reading
know, like
Plato freshman year.
huh? Yeah.
You're gonna get executed like Socrates.
I don't know. I feel like I guess technically people don't really like want to be like criticized for like having inconsistencies and stuff. But like from my perspective, I'm like, why wouldn't you want like to know like if you have like a flaw in your like beliefs so that you can fix that up, you know? But like I feel like people think differently.
People often do not want that. I will
Mm.
tell you from experience that that generally speaking, if someone is wrong, they don't want to know about it.
Also, speaking from personal experience, I think people enjoy being right.
Um,
Uh, I think a way to get around it is probably not to poke when people are telling you things that when people are being vulnerable in conversation with you, it's probably better not to poke. But also a way of getting around people not wanting to tell you things, especially when you're sort of meeting them for the first time, is to be vulnerable first.
It's a great, great idea.
Yeah. And you don't have to do it like, I feel like there's also a kind of delicacy to doing it because you don't want to drop it on them, right? But you want to give them like a little morsel of vulnerability, and then they feel like, oh, I can let my guard down a little bit. And then they give you something, and then you give them something a little bigger, and then you kind of progress that way.
Yeah, I feel like that's helpful. I feel like I have a tendency to like ask more questions than
Mm.
I should or something.
That is very true. I think you certainly had a reputation, at least in college, for asking a lot of tough questions but not giving a lot of concrete answers yourself.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Sometimes people just don't ask, like, so I don't know if they really want to know that about me. But
Shaking my head at people.
yeah, I'm like, maybe I'm just not interesting. So
Nah,
I'll just
that's
look
not
like
true.
that. There's like, sometimes I read like those like self help. I feel like I read at least one of those self help books where they're like, oh, to have a conversation, if it's difficult, just keep talking about the other person. People like talking about themselves.
That is true.
I think you definitely, yeah, have used that
Yeah.
in the past.
I think that's pretty good as like a starting thing, but I also think people will start to feel more comfortable if they like people like talking about themselves, but if you want to develop a closer relationship, people tend to feel more comfortable if they feel like they also know things about the other person.
It's why people like. Do you remember Tia, Danny?
Yeah.
It's why people like Tia will get all of the tea. Everyone will tell Tia all of their secrets because Tia is willing to share her own secrets, right? People feel a lot more comfortable.
This is why I don't get any tea.
Yeah, exactly. Even though, and Kelly, right? Kelly learns everything from anyone.
Also,
Literally,
by the way, for all of our thousands and millions of listeners, any names that we happen to use in the show don't actually correlate with real people that we know. They're all fake names.
Yeah.
you know Kelly, right? Like everyone tells Kelly everything, even though she's not very good at holding on to those secrets. Like she's particularly bad at it, but people still tell her everything because she's very very willing to share her own issues and her own vulnerabilities.
Yeah, I feel like
Yeah,
that
I
is
feel like
difficult though, because
extroverts
you
in
want to.
general have like a better strategy in terms of like number of stories or tea extracted. I feel like they still miss out on certain like niches because like as like like an introvert myself, like Kelly's not the first person I would share like my tea with, but I would still go to her to hear the tea.
Yeah, I feel like for introverts, there's definitely this desire for exclusivity. I feel like if I know that other people, like if I know someone isn't is telling the tea that they're telling me to a bunch of other people, then I'm like, well, I don't want to share my tea with you because it's not like an exclusive tea trade. You have to set down tea trade tariffs, protections, something like that.
I'm only a tea importer. I don't export.
It's bothering me that my hat is disappearing and then reappearing.
You have a very nice hat.
Thank you. Thank you. What are some good ways of meeting people if you are not in a situation where it is easy to meet people organically? Yes, Ian.
Tinder. Oh, that wasn't the meaning of your question. Oof, my bad.
Head scratch, head scratch.
I mean, like Bumble has like the friend like
Hmm.
thing filter, and there's also like apps that are just like for friends, I think.
Hmm.
But I haven't really tried them out, so I can't say for sure.
Would you be interested in trying them out?
It would make a good YouTube video, that's for sure.
Hmm.
Try out those apps.
The 8 types of friends you meet on Bumble Friend.
No, you wouldn't say something like that. You'd say something like, I tried Bumble Friend and you wouldn't believe who I met. Or you wouldn't believe the people I met, right? Like something like that.
Yeah, try
That'd be
Bumble Friends. Almost died.
yeah, yeah, that's another good one. But you'd have to actually like had some experience to put that.
Hmm.
The you wouldn't believe is totally fine no matter what.
Hmm.
That's a YouTube video I'd probably click on. E-way would click on it.
I would click on it if you were making the YouTube video, yeah. Do you think that there's an age at which, or like a point in life at which you don't see a point in making new friends? Can one ever have too many friends?
I feel like I have a very scarce selection of friends, so not for me anytime soon.
Yeah, I don't think that's a question I really am
But
thinking
I feel like
about.
some people do feel like they have enough friends. I think, yeah, because you can only spend like so much time with each friend, so you can like there's definitely like an upper limit of how many friends you can like keep up with,
Mm.
right? Yeah.
I think I read somewhere that our brain can process close relationships to like 5 people and can process relationships to I think a maximum of 50 people.
50?
50's a lot.
I
Yeah,
thought it was like 200 or something.
maybe it was 200. It was something like that. And they explained it as that number being sort of the amount in prehistoric tribes or something like that,
Hmm.
Yeah.
which would kind of make sense. It's like your family, then your extended family, then your extended family.
I don't know. I knew more people than that in high school. I knew everyone in my entire grade, and there was like 250 kids, right?
Mm.
Acquaintances.
Acquaintances, yeah.
Like how like you probably don't talk to all of them now still, right?
Oh, definitely not now, no.
Believe me, I've forgotten the names of probably pretty much everyone in my high school except for
Forgotten a
like
lot of them too.
15 people.
Yeah, I haven't seen a lot of people from high school. Like after high school, people just kind of diverge. I feel like I'll never see a lot of them again, probably.
I'm still friends with some people from high school,
Mhm.
but I don't know how close we'll be in the long term. We'll see.
So are you guys trying to make friends these days? Or
I'm not,
feel
but
like
I
you're
probably
comfortable?
should. I don't know anyone in my town, in my city.
Wait, what did you say?
I'm not, but I probably should. I don't really know anyone in my city.
You feel like you lack like physically proximate friends?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I usually tell myself that I'm just perfectly okay without any interaction at all. Um,
Mm.
but I don't know if that's actually true or not.
I think I'm still trying to make friends, but I also think that my friendship energy levels are to some extent limited.
Mm.
Yeah. And it's also a matter of like how much the other person is willing to advance the relationship. So
Friendships are
I
a two-way street.
yeah, they are. Um I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of overlap in sort of romantic courtship, if you will, and also the development of friendship. Because I think they progress through similar stages. Um, I think here at college, like friend dates, not that they're actually called that, but these seem to be pretty common. There's a lot of like friendship by appointment culture.
Friendship by appointment? What's that?
So it wasn't something that I'd really thought about, but there was a girl I was talking to in one of my classes, and she had actually transferred from a different school. And she said that at our school, friendship by appointment is a thing where you'll like set a time to meet ahead of in advance with friends. So you'll be like, let's grab coffee sometime this week. When are you free? And then the person will list all their availabilities. And then you'll list all your availabilities. And you, if you have like a common availability, that's when you'll meet, as opposed to just texting a friend at 3 p.m. one day and saying, hey, do you want to grab coffee right now? And just doing things spontaneously.
Oh,
Which is
that's
something I never
interesting.
really thought about because I just kind of assumed that that was the norm.
Oh, I didn't know that was called friendship pointing or something
Friendship by appointment.
by appointment.
Yeah.
New
I
term
don't
for
Uh-huh.
me
know.
also.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the official term, but that was what she called it.
Mm. I mean, it makes
Seems
sense.
official enough.
People are busy sometimes, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so what kind of so like in terms of friendships, right? Like, what do you look for in a friendship slash romantic relationship since there's so much overlap?
Vulnerability.
Huh? Vulnerability?
I think a willingness to be vulnerable and also yeah, I think just like a willingness to be vulnerable and provide support um both ways is probably the most important thing.
Mhm.
I think if those conditions are met, then both parties feel comfortable to be themselves in the relationship.
Um,
Whereas if you have to keep things from the other person, there's, like it's not as genuine. What were you gonna say?
Yeah. What's up, Ian?
oh, I was just gonna say at the beginning of friendships, I think I tend to reflect other people's behavior just in general when I'm interacting with new people because it's a good way to make people feel at ease.
So
Um,
reflect,
yeah.
like mirroring,
What?
like mirroring.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Essentially. Um, yeah. Um, and I think I don't consciously make decisions, but I think subconsciously I probably choose people that I enjoy reflecting almost. So like I understand them, and I also enjoy reflecting their behavior. I think that the person I am when I'm around them is okay.
Mm,
So what kind of
that's a
people
good
do
one.
you enjoy reflecting?
It's a
Like,
whole wide range of people. Like Kelly's a great time to hang out with pretty much all the time, right?
do you think you can enjoy being friends with yourself?
As in yourself in isolation or yourself
So
if there was a clone
Like,
of
I'm like
yourself.
this is
hypothetically,
this is
there's like
my
a clone and they just reflect each other.
okay, but my question is, do I know it's a clone of myself, or is it someone who's very similar to me, or is basically myself, but I meet and they're from some other like do I know it's a clone of myself?
Oh, does it matter?
Yeah.
Wait, it does?
Yeah, I think so. I
Uh,
don't know. I can tell you if I do know it's a clone of myself, it's going to be very easily, yup, we'd get along great. Um, because I would understand myself, you know, and I would understand that I would understand myself. So we'd have an excellent time. Um, but otherwise, I think there's a chance that we'd get off on the wrong foot. But I like to hope that we'd be able to be friendly just by virtue of common interests, if anything else. Maybe we wouldn't be very close friends, but by having common interests, we would at least be casual acquaintances.
Do you think you'd be close friends with yourself, Danny?
Um, I feel like I'm a pretty unique person. So like when I come across most people, like they don't really remind me, like at least like in this entirely. Like there's like sometimes I'm like, oh, they think like similar to me on like this aspect. So I'm like, I feel like it would be interesting to meet someone who's like very similar to myself, especially if they have like, especially if like they're not like exact clone with like the same history. I'd be like,
Mm.
how did you come up with like these conclusions? And like, yeah, but I feel like if they're like perfectly identical, like maybe we'll get along like fine because we'll like mutually understand each other and stuff. But I feel like part of like what I find interesting about people is like when they're like quite different from me. Um, because then there's always like if I'm conversing with them, like something new to like understand that like I never thought about before.
Mm.
I feel like having a clone, it's just kind of like you're just talking to yourself, and you can do that with just one of you.
Well,
What do
I
you
don't
think?
know, man.
What do you think, Yodel?
Um, yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting that you say you haven't come across anyone who really thinks like you, Danny, because I was thinking about that as well. And I think that people, like everyone is kind of, not to be like everyone is unique in their own way, but I feel like everyone is kind of unique in their own way because of the people that I've spoken to. Maybe I just haven't spoken to that many people. But I think that people do think about things very differently. Um, I guess that was tangential. I don't know if I would be friends with myself or not. I'd like to think that I would be, but I feel like when you think about yourself within your own head, you have a certain picture of who you are. Um, and oftentimes that picture is somewhat self-delusional. So I think it would be very interesting to encounter yourself without that filter.
It's certainly true that people's one great commonality is that they think they're all unique.
Well, am I wrong though?
That's true. I haven't really met anyone like you, Danny.
Well, everyone's like you in the sense that they think they're unique. Which is a paradox.
Do you believe that people can fall into archetypes?
I feel like I feel like I feel like there's like a psychology term for it. It's called like individuation.
Mm-hmm.
But like obviously like everyone's different, but like maybe there might be like statistical thing where like
Some people are more different than others.
especially like at a younger age, right? Like people tend to be like more similar to each other.
Mm,
And as they grow up and they form like
yeah,
their identity, they sort of like branch out.
yeah.
I'd buy that.
I feel like some people get stuck, so they never like they have like an
They never
archetype, and then
involve.
they never like really like change after that. Sort of some people.
I think in our current day and age, more people are like that than they used to be.
Mm. Why is
Social
that?
media is a normalizing force.
Yes, I agree with the other person.
So then okay, I guess when looking for friends slash pursuing friendships, what makes a person interesting to you, Danny?
Um, Damn, I was gonna ask those questions.
But you were gonna ask the same thing, or you had a different question?
Something similar. Because I was thinking about it, because I was gonna ask because you say like you were looking to like make more friends, right? Because I sometimes I think about because I feel like I'm at a point where like if I like think about it, I have like pretty few friends. It'd be like nice to have more, but like I'm also like pretty picky about friends. I feel like,
Mm.
um, and it's just like, wait, first of all, what was your question again? I sort of forgot.
When looking for friends or pursuing a friendship with like a potential friend, um,
What makes them
what makes them
interesting?
interesting? Yeah.
Yeah, so like what makes it like sometimes I think about like exactly like what sorts of friends I want, right?
Hmm.
Um, I feel like having friends like usually the most satisfying part to me is just like having like a relationship with someone where like you can just have conversations and like support, I guess, right?
Mm.
Because like conversation in general, when I first thought about it, at least I feel like you guys gave more examples, but when I first thought about it, I just thought conversations were a like information like
Hmm.
exchange, right? Because everyone has like their own set of information that you can share and like you both gain more
Mm.
knowledge from it. And two, just like forming friendships with
Hmm.
people. Um, and when I think about it that way, like the first one, just getting more information, I feel like I can get that like just from the internet or reading or stuff. So
Mm.
that makes it like less of like a draw
Mm.
for like making friends. So yeah, I feel like I'm going on a tangent. Just spewing stuff. I feel like because of that, like perhaps like I feel like because of that, perhaps like people's technical like skills and stuff and like technical knowledge and stuff isn't as important. So like if someone's like knows a lot of history facts or astronomy facts, right? Or like they're really good at math. I feel like that doesn't really like substitute for like their personality because like I can also get that from like a textbook and stuff.
Mm.
Um, I feel like there's also like just like a correlation between like what people choose to pursue and the type of person they are. So I'm like a little bit conflicted, like how to approach it. Um, yeah. Okay. I feel like I've gone on a tangent for a while now. Let's go back. So the question was,
What about a person makes them interesting
Interesting.
to you?
okay, what about make person makes them interesting? Um, okay, so I feel like okay, so that's supposes that like some people are more interesting than others, right? I feel like some people are like more one dimensional than others. I also find those like at least a little bit interesting in some way. I'm like, how are you so one dimensional? uh, in terms of like what makes people interesting, I guess it's like I like to know about like people's views on life, like what drives them, and like what led them to like have this sort of perspective on the world. Um, like interesting hobbies like writing, reading and stuff. I'm
Mm.
like, what are you reading? Interesting. Why are you reading that? Stuff like that. Yeah.
Danny, have you ever thought about being a journalist?
Journalists.
You'd be good at that.
I think you'd be a pretty good journalist.
Journalists, they just like ask people questions and like write about them, right?
Yeah. You could also just do filmed interviews. Then you wouldn't have to do any writing.
Mm, that feels journalist feels a bit like economical to me. I would like to just have conversations with other
Mm.
people and save it for myself.
You know who said that but then had to make money?
What?
Joe Rogan. You don't know who Joe Rogan is?
He's the guy with the podcast.
He's the biggest podcaster in the world. He's the
After
guy
what?
who always invites crazy people and gets into controversy because of it. He has everyone on his podcast. Every single person.
Yeah. He's pretty good at like making conversations about stuff he
Mm.
doesn't know about. Surprisingly.
He's
That's pretty cool. That's a good
extraordinarily
skill to have.
popular.
Sometimes I feel like I live under a rock.
Not knowing Joe Rogan is pretty bad. That was one you should have known.
What about not listening to Joe Rogan? Is that bad?
I don't listen to Joe Rogan.
Yeah, I had a roommate who did. I was like, cool.
I don't really have a strong opinion either way. I'm not like a big Joe Rogan lover, big Joe Rogan hater. It just, he's a guy.
Mm.
So what do you guys find interesting about people? Slash, what do you guys actually yeah, let's just leave it at that. So you guys like find certain people just like really boring to talk to?
No, I agree with you. I think people that are boring are very interesting.
I feel like I don't know if they're top tier interesting. They're like at least have a certain level of interesting.
Yeah, but it's like how can I not get anything out from you except for one thing, you know what I mean? Like it just makes you want to really dig deeply because
Yeah.
there's got to be something else. So, in my opinion, the most interesting I think that the people with the least to say are often not the least interesting because they're very good at obfuscating at not saying anything, which makes them the hardest to get information out of. You know what I mean? So those people are actually interesting because it's a puzzle.
You talked on me.
No. Oh, I don't know. I don't think so. I think you have a lot to say. That's not quite right.
I
Uh,
think you just have to be in the right environment.
yeah.
But I feel like that's the case of old people.
But I feel like,
Uh,
yeah.
some people can be buried kind of deep.
Yeah, but I mean, some people I see and I'm like, they don't really have much more to say, and then those are not super interesting people. I don't know. I find all people interesting. I don't really have a like tier list.
Well, like, what do you find interesting about people?
Just
Give
everything.
me.
So, like, if I threw you in with like a chatbot that just like randomly generates responses, you're like interesting. A
Eh.
human.
I feel like you'd be able to figure out that was a chatbot pretty quick if the responses are randomly generated.
Well, they usually have like a query of like things that make sense in the context. And you can it's sort of like ambiguous sometimes where like if they're just being like sarcastic or making a joke versus like if they're actually making a serious response. So sometimes it kind of hides like
All right.
whether
So an AI. I don't know. I think that would be pretty interesting, but yeah. I'm not. I think one of the things that Yodel would probably say is interesting things are what interest people.
Mm,
Would Yodel say that?
I would like to be the kind of person who says that, but I think I have since had to come to terms with the fact that
Some things
sometimes
are
when
just
people are
boring.
interested in things, I'm just not interested. I think people are interesting, but that doesn't always correlate to what those people are interested in.
In conclusion,
It's like a song by Blink 182 entitled All the Small Things. That's what's interesting.
so what do you find interesting about people? At Yodel. Nice hat, by the way. Very
Thank you.
interesting.
Thank you. My friend who was very interesting knitted the hat for me. Or crocheted the hat. I guess crocheted. So now I'm wearing it. I think people's personal lives are very interesting, which is difficult to come by unless you achieve a certain level of closeness. So,
Does it matter
alas,
what kind of personal life they lead?
no.
What if they lead like a very disciplined, predictable, monotonous routine life?
I still think that's pretty interesting,
Mm.
and I'd want to know how they got to that point.
Yodel's the type of person who would uh, live in a New York City apartment and stare at someone across the way.
I would eavesdrop on my neighbors if I could. Even people who aren't my neighbors, just eavesdrop.
I think that people's uh, micro interactions, I guess, in social settings is very interesting. Like, not just what they're saying or whether I guess everything they do that is not talking, you know.
Mm,
Nonverbal communication is very cool. I think it's something I pick up on fairly well. So I like observing it because I feel
it,
like most people miss it.
mm, I agree. But also to kind of contradict that, I think listening in on people's phone calls, super interesting.
Boy, Yodel and the American government have a lot of similarities.
Yeah, love the American government. Freedom.
It's 9/11, by
Yeah,
the way. So
it might be the time for me to head out and initiate sleeping.
are we gonna do exoplanets in history this week or no?
All right, we can do it.
I can give it one line.
Okay.
Today's exoplanet of the week is J1407b, which is a small planet with really massive rings. So the ring system, the rings are like tens of millions of kilometers across. So that if we swapped out Saturn's rings with that planet's rings, it would be larger than, brighter than a full moon, and it would be able to see it in the sky from Earth.
I have a question,
Yeah.
a general question. Like, because you say you find people interesting, so like, do you find like studying rocks in space more interesting than people?
That's a very good question. Um, I think that a person needs different interests in their life.
Uh,
So I like to separate I guess my private interests from my public interests. And I think that my public interests are satisfied by studying rocks, but I would like to live a life where I can be nosy and learn about other people's personal lives. Yes, Ian.
Can I give a analysis of yeah, Yodel is interested in things that Yodel does not know already. So whether it be rocks or people, it's all the same to Yodel.
I do like rocks. In a way, people like rocks. You want to, like crack open the rock to get at what's inside.
And to do that, you have to break it. So there you go. People are just like rocks. All right, give me a history topic. I'll do a one sentence.
Sentence.
Soviet Russia.
Oh, yeah, that one can definitely fit in one sentence.
In Soviet Russia, pawn takes knight. That's it.
That's a pretty good one. Book recommendations?
Okay, I'll go first. So I didn't really read any fiction this week, but I did read a book called The Zen of Seeing. So it's basically about Zen slash drawing, and like the author argues about like it's not really like a how-to book. It's more of like about Zen, about like becoming the plant or whatever. How much you draw and just let the drawing draw itself. It's pretty chill read. I feel like, yeah, so I found it pretty fun read. Because I feel like sometimes that's like what I'm after. Because I feel like when I'm learning something, there's also always like the technical aspect of like improving like your technical skills and analysis, stuff like that. But then like sometimes I just want to like step back and just like unlearn everything and just like do more feeling rather than analysis. So
My book recommendation is Jonah's Okay by Wai Wang, which is about a Chinese American doctor um, who is the attending of an ICU, and COVID happens at the end of the book, but it's not a book about COVID. It's a book about the doctor. I think you'd particularly like it, Danny.
I would like it.
Mm.
Okay. Cool.
My recommendation, which is the only media I've really consumed in the last week, or the most media, is the Magnus Archives. It's a podcast. It's a horror podcast, and I think the opening episodes are very, very good. And I don't say that lightly because the opening episodes are episodic, and I am a person who really doesn't like episodic media. I particularly like overarching storylines, but this is very good. So I've been listening to it in the car, I've been listening to it while I'm cooking, and I've liked it so far.
Cool.
I tried once to listen to it before I went to bed, and it did not make me more sleepy. So I wouldn't recommend it as a going to sleep thing.
All right. This has been another episode of DIY.
DIY.
Listening.
If you're